And a good Monday to you, Central Georgia. Thanks for tuning in here for a look at your extended forecast. Hopefully you had a nice and restful Easter weekend and got recharged and ready to go to hit the ground running for what is the first week back at school for many of you that were on spring break, or maybe this is just the beginning of your spring break forecast, getting ready to head out of town. Want to know what the weather story is all across the southeast or wherever you may be traveling to. It's very quiet. Go ahead and give you a bit of a tease with your forecast, but overall, we're not going to be talking about too much in terms of what's going to be in store ahead in the way of rain chances. But we did just get through a stretch where we had our fair share of rain chances, specifically yesterday for Easter Sunday, where we saw some widespread rain. And all of the rainfall that we've gotten over the course of the last couple of days hasn't been taken into account just yet when it does come to your drought monitor. So this was the latest release we got as of last Thursday, and you can see that almost all of the state of Georgia under at least a severe drought or even higher, an extreme drought and an exceptional drought present all across the southern portion of the state, areas of north and northeast Georgia. In fact, we do have almost 2/3 of the state that are in an extreme drought or higher. Actually, I believe that actually goes for the severe drought criteria as well. But very few areas are only lingering in the abnormally dry section or maybe the moderate drought section. That's going to be your tan color, and we can see that abnormally dry sliver just pushing into Washington County and over into eastern Baldwin County. But all of central Georgia has all 5 of these categories that we do see on the drought monitor, from abnormally dry all the way down to an exceptional drought. But very thankfully, the exceptional drought, which is the worst that you can get, that is only present in southern Telfair County. We don't see that very widespread whatsoever. And I do anticipate at least none of these conditions worsening too much as we go throughout the next couple of days. However, southeast central Georgia, they could see maybe even some potential worsening, which we'll talk about why that is. But we did get our fair share of rainfall as of recently, and that's going to be a big factor because we have to go all the way back to last Tuesday when this drought monitor has all the data taken up. So as of March 31st, last month was the last time that we did take all the data into account. We got some rain last Tuesday on the 31st. We had rain on April Fool's Day. We had a dry Thursday before heading into a weekend where we saw pop-up rain chances, some of which resulted in some pretty substantial rainfall amounts. But first and foremost, let's talk about the intensity of this drought because it is the worst that we have been since we kicked off this dry stretch as of late last year. So late last year, September 1st, roughly around the time that we started to reintroduce these dry and these drought conditions back into the forecast. Well, since that period, all the way into the beginning of the month of April last week, we are almost 12.5 inches below what we typically see on average from that month of September all the way into the month of April. So we need about a foot of rain to just get back to around where we should be this time of year. But of course, you can't get all of that at one time. That can start to lead to flooding concerns. So you kind of have to find that happy medium. You have to get your substantial rainfall amounts. However, you are going to want to have those spread out over the course of a longer period of time. Some gradual improvement with these drought conditions. You don't want it all just fixed instantly. And in fact, flooding concerns obviously wouldn't really do much in the way of fixing all of that, but at least it would finally saturate the soil a good bit more. So this is the state's most significant drought in about 15 years. 2011 and 2012 was the last time that we saw drought conditions this bad across the state. And obviously, there's not much that we can really do besides continuing to make sure that you're watering your plants, you're watering your lawn, making sure that you're doing that in the early morning hours and also during the evening hours in order to limit the hours of evaporation that can occur. If you water your plants, say, in the early morning hours and when there's not too much sunshine up, that water is going to sit there for a little while until the sun does get high enough to where it starts evaporating it. But the best time to water anything in the way of plants, in the way of your backyard garden, in the way of turning on your sprinklers, going to be the evening hours and getting into the nighttime hours. That's why typically you set the sprinkler timer to go off during the overnight hours, not only so it doesn't get in your way as you're doing some yard work and moving out and about in the front or the backyard, but also because it will limit that time of evaporation. That's the biggest thing that I can really tell you, making sure that you're continuing to water those plants. Excuse me, I'm so used to saying pets, plants, and pipes when we're talking about the freezing conditions that I keep having pets pop up in my head. But nonetheless, plants are going to be something that need to be watered pretty frequently in light of this most significant drought that we've seen in about 15 years. But very thankfully, what we haven't really taken into account so far are all of these. And we've actually had even more rainfall than just the last 5 days. We have to go back to the last 6 days because we started our stretch of some daily rain chances, those pop-up showers and some thunderstorms as of 6 days ago. So there's probably about another inch or two that could be added on to some of the totals that we see across central Georgia, but you will notice that the greens and those pockets of some yellow and some orange are present mainly to the west and mainly down to the southwest here in central Georgia. We do see it stretching across I-75, but there's not as much rainfall over down in our southeastern quadrant, an area that is sitting in a severe drought, extreme drought, and even some portions in that exceptional drought, unfortunately. So just picking apart some totals, farther up to the north, unless you found yourself up here in Butts, Jasper, and portions of Putnam counties, that's where we did see some totals maybe up to 1 to about 2 inches. But for the most part, you only totaled about a couple tenths of an inch of rain. Not much to be found in Jones County, Baldwin County, up in Hancock County, Washington County. But then as you start to get more so into the central portion of central Georgia, some isolated pockets up pretty close to 2 inches across Upson County over to the west. We can see a pocket of 3.3 inches of rain pretty close to the Lake Wildwood and Lake Tobosoffke areas in West Bibb County, but downtown Macon only getting about 1/4 of an inch of rain. But you can see this little sliver right there of some green stretching up into southern Bibb County. That's important because that's where Middle Georgia Regional Airport is, and hopefully we got some fairly impressive totals that did get tallied there because that's where all of our observation data does come from, and we'll talk more about that observation data in the coming graphics. But then as you get into this widespread patch of some green and some yellow, that's where you're going to find a lot of totals of at least 1 to 2, maybe even close to 3 inches or even 4 inches of rain across portions of Taylor County, which most definitely lucked out with the most rain that we did see over this entire stretch. And even as you go into areas like Pulaski, Bleckley, down to Dodge counties, you guys saw your fair share of some pretty impressive totals as well. So as we get down farther to the south, remember on that drought monitor, we did see a pretty widespread extreme drought in that dark red color in south central Georgia. But the areas of exceptional drought, that was down in southern Telfair County, and it looks like we only got a couple tenths of an inch of rain across Telfair County and little to nothing across Wheeler, Montgomery, and Treutlen counties. It's really as you go east of Dublin, there was just not too much rain to be found, kind of a fairly dry patch over here, and I imagine it was attributed to just some light showers that continued to lose their intensity as that line of rain pushed through late yesterday evening. But at Middle Georgia Regional Airport, we've had 3 days so far in the month of April that we've recorded rain. Got the party started with about 3/10 of an inch of rain, and then only about 5/100 of an inch of rain back on the 4th, which was going to be Saturday. But then you go into Sunday, Easter Sunday yesterday, we recorded just around 0.66 inches, so pretty close to around 7/10 of an inch. When you add up all those numbers, ironically enough, it is 1 inch flat of rainfall so far in the first couple of days of the month, which is good enough to put us back at the top of the near normal category. This is the first time we've been flirting with any of these blue boxes that have been at the top of this graphic for 3 months so far out of the year. So it's very nice to see that we have a little bit of a cushion to maybe undergo a little bit of a dry stretch. I would anticipate finally by the time we get out of the end of the dry stretch that is about to settle in, we might be somewhere in the dry category, but we've been very dry and exceptionally dry for our fair share of days so far in 2026. We will definitely take any sort of little improvement that we can see. But we are well on our way to trying to hit that average of 3.5 inches of rainfall for the month of April. 3.53, 3.55 I have on some graphics, but virtually the same number, and not as substantial and not as tall of a task in order to hit like we did have for the month of March, where the average rainfall for the month of March was nearly 5 inches. So obviously it was going to be very hard to hit that number, but March was very, very dry, besides the couple severe weather makers that we did have that came through. Record for the month of April came back in 2020, nearly 1 foot of rainfall at 11.9 inches of rain. So for the month of April so far, I did mention we're in the top of that near normal category. Well, we're just over 1/4 of an inch, about where we should be, good enough for at least a green box that continues to pop up after 3 straight months of red boxes. And really, if we date it back to 2025, I imagine it's been about 7 straight months where we've had a red box tally here for your rainfall on average and based on your 30-year normals. So what I mean by that is all this data that you're seeing is based off data from the early 1900s into the early 2020s. This isn't taking every single year into account. So the averages aren't exactly the same as what you will see on those records that I always put up, or what we averagely see on the other graphic that we just showed you, because I take in all of the years of records into account since we started recording data back in the late 1800s. But all this data is taken as of April 5th. We'll revisit it once our next rain chance does come around, but this is not the headline that you do want to see when I just talked about this is the most significant drought that we've seen in nearly 15 years here in central Georgia. A cooler and a drier stretch of weather. We're going to have below average highs, which I'm sure you felt as you made your way out the door already this morning, but there will be warmer temperatures back in the forecast as we go into the weekend ahead. First things first, let's walk it around the quad where it's a mostly cloudy atmosphere. Yes, there are some areas where the cloud cover is not looking as thick in nature. There are some areas where you can actually get a glimpse of some blue sky, but overall you're not seeing too much sunshine unless you are, of course, maybe in downtown Dublin where I see a couple of shadows, but it does look like there are no shadows, just plenty of shade down here at the Georgia National Fairgrounds. Same case in Warner Robins, maybe a bit more sunshine up in downtown Macon, but it's a pretty gloomy atmosphere that is going to continue to help keep our temperatures at bay, which I would talk about our temperatures, but we have no temperatures that are recording right now in downtown Macon. But I did want to turn your attention to this current temperatures graphic because take a look at all of these numbers, which really around this time we're used to seeing numbers like Jacksonville and Orlando somewhere in the 70s across the eastern United States. That's not the case because our cold front that passed through not only impacted us, but it has impacted many areas of the country, keeping the numbers well below average and still lingering in the 50s for most locations, a couple 60s over there in Texas. And as you go way up to the north, we're continuing to see some upper 40s, 48 in Denver, 49 in Kansas City. I think I spot a single digit value up there in Green Bay at the very top of the screen, but nonetheless, it is very cold, or relatively cool, I guess I should say, across the eastern United States. It is downright cold up in areas to the north and the northern plains, getting into the Great Lakes region of the country, but obviously they're pretty accustomed to some values that are that chilly as well. So current temperatures, we see some blue shades building into northern Georgia, getting into northwest Georgia, northeast Alabama, but for the most part, it's a good mix of the 50s and the 60s, with that one lone 70 being down there in Jacksonville. Our temperatures here in central Georgia, we have numbers back in Warner Robins, which they popped away a little bit this morning as well, but still working to get the numbers back in the Macon area. It does appear that we're in the upper half of the 50s or already into the lower 60s across many areas. 61 pretty popular amongst Eatonton, Sparta, Milledgeville, down to Dublin and down to McRae. The warmest temperatures are going to be found over here to the east and the southeast, which does line up. Front moved in from northwest down to southeast, so areas to the northwest are feeling that colder air mass a little bit more profoundly than areas that saw the passage of the frontal boundary a little bit later down to the southeast. There are some windy conditions that have settled into the forecast already. Some gusts up to 20 and 21 miles per hour across Eastman, Dublin, and Vidalia, but those gustier winds are mainly present farther over to the east and the southeast that you do travel, as opposed to up to the northwest where there's simply just a light breeze, maybe around 5 to 7 miles per hour across areas like Thomaston, getting down to Warner Robins and all the way up to Milledgeville. Here's a look at your humidity levels where we finally don't have any shades of light green whatsoever. Those are going to be found as you go down into southern Georgia and into the northern portion of the Florida Peninsula, indicating that our frontal boundary has ushered in not only cooler air, but also some significantly drier air. A lot of these dew point temperatures were hovering in the 60s, maybe even flirting with the 70s as of recently, which contributed to that summer-like pattern that we did have in terms of the pop-up rain chances. Well, there is not a lot to work with in terms of moisture in the lower levels of the atmosphere, and we are going to keep the dew point temperatures in very, very dry range, not really looking at anything in the way of light green shades building back into that graphic whatsoever over the course of the next couple of days. Here's a look at your satellite imagery. Gray and gloomy, I know, just like we were talking about, but obviously the cloud cover not necessarily looking as messy as this as you look at it from ground level, surface level, just underneath the cloud cover. So these areas where you start to see more of a darker gray shade, that's going to indicate some thinner cloud cover in nature, like what you spot up here in Hancock County. The brighter white shade that you get of these clouds, that is going to indicate some thicker cloud cover. So there is going to be more so some lower level clouds that are going to be present in Washington County and across many areas like downtown Macon and going into West Georgia, but nothing in the way of rainfall that we can see in central Georgia. Rain chances are going to be, or not rain chances because it is already raining, but rain showers are going to be present down in southeast Alabama, moving into southwest Georgia, and the farther that you go down I-75 south as you start to get closer to Valdosta, good cluster of some light and maybe some pockets of some steady rain down in these areas where the frontal boundary still might be hanging around a little bit down there in southern Georgia. So let's talk about the numbers. 56 as you walked out the door yesterday. Well, in fact, that was not your morning low temperature yesterday morning. Your morning low sat somewhere around 62 degrees yesterday for those sunrise services around for your Easter Sunday. We got a temperature increase all the way into the mid 70s, even despite all the cloud cover and all the rain cooled air. So still made our way to around where we should have been this time of year. But 56, that was actually the temperature that we hit just before the midnight hour as of last night, indicating that that cool down was pretty substantial from that high temperature of 76 down 20 degrees, and that number continued to get cooler and cooler as we walked out the door this morning. So 49 degrees, that's around where we should be this time of year. I really want to emphasize that because yes, it's been a while since we felt the 40s as of our recent warm stretch. However, 49 degrees, that is going to be pretty normal. Having a little bit of a chill in the air is going to be normal for this time of year, a couple days into the month of April. 91 degrees for a high temperature, record high temperature that is, 1988. 2000, we set a record low temperature of 32 degrees. So it is still possible to reach that 32 degree mark even in early April. However, we have not gotten close to any sort of record-breaking low temperature as of recently, and I don't foresee any of that in your 7-day forecast. Really, take it way out into your extended forecast. It looks like we're going to enter another warm stretch as we go into next week. So definitely record lows. That will be something that we are not talking about whatsoever. So precipitation, we talked about it a little bit. 0.66 inches of rain recorded yesterday at Middle Georgia Regional Airport. So your year departure still right there in the middle of 4 and 5 inches below average, or below where we should be this time of year, rather I should say. And again, that year departure based on the 30-year normals, not the larger sample size of rainfall accounted for all time going back into the late 1800s. Sunrise 7:17, sunset yesterday 7:58. Now, I think your almanac data is running a little bit ahead of what is actually occurring, but you can see that sunset is creeping closer and closer to the 8 p.m. hour. So before we talk about that, let's go ahead and talk about your high temperatures so far in the month of April, where every day has been above average. Even your temperature yesterday afternoon, it was 1 degree above average, even though the average high temperature is now bumped up to 76 degrees. So obviously that kind of classifies more so as a near normal day, but hey, I don't make the averages, I don't make the rules. 76, it was 1 degree above your average high of 75 yesterday, and now your high temperature or average high temperature for today is going to be 76 degrees, which I do anticipate we're actually going to sit below. So today does look to be the first below average day we will have in the month of April. Not to worry, it looks like April is going to get off to a very warm start, just like we did in the month of March. So April 9th, that is going to be this Thursday. That is a day I want to put on your radar if you are eagerly awaiting that first 8 p.m. sunset, because that's going to be when it is. It might be a little bit earlier. It might be Wednesday, roughly around that range. Wednesday into Thursday, that's when you are going to start to notice the sunset setting, or the sun setting at 8 p.m. And that is going to mark a period of nearly 13 hours of daylight, which we actually get over 13 hours of daylight for the last time that we see the sunrise at the 7 a.m. hour. And that is going to be all the way until we get into the month of August. We're going to see the sunrise before 7 a.m. and before many of your alarm clocks are going off each and every morning. So don't be surprised to see some of those blinds showing some sunshine trying to peek through. If you are thinking about investing in some blackout curtains, I think this would be a great time period to do so. June 22nd, that obviously is a ways away, but that's where I wanted to highlight. That is going to be the latest sunset we will see all year. So 8 p.m. sunset this Wednesday into Thursday, 8:07 by the time we roll into the 19th of April. And then as we go into the middle of the summer, in fact, right there in the first couple of days of official summer, we will see the sunset at 8:46 p.m. and there will be a stretch of about 10 days in a row where the sunset will be at that time before it finally begins to get a little bit earlier and a little bit earlier after we reach that summer solstice a day before the 22nd on the 21st. the days will continue to get shorter and shorter. So our max daylight looking to be around 14 hours and nearly 20 minutes of daylight as we go into the summer. So now let's break down your forecast for today. We saw all the widespread cloud cover, and that in combination with just the general cooler air that is filtered in behind our frontal boundary, that's going to keep your warm up at bay. So we're going to make a climb into the mid 60s and eventually into the upper 60s this afternoon. And it looks like that's kind of where our warm up does stall out. So cooler and cloudy for your Monday. I have a high temperature a little bit warmer. Wouldn't be surprised to not even see some values make it up to 69 degrees. Wouldn't be surprised to see a 70 or two in some areas that actually have an occasional gap or so in the cloud cover. That does allow for a bit more of a warming trend. But nonetheless, whether you're at 70 degrees, whether you're at 67 degrees for a high temperature today, your average high sits at 76 degrees like we were just talking about and rambling on about with the calendar graphic. Everyone is going to be below that value, so it does look to be the first official blue box that we have on that calendar graphic. But also within this cloud cover, we do have some sprinkle chances. They're very small, they're very minuscule. It's not really anything you need to worry about. And in fact, just some small sprinkle chances. That's all we're going to be talking about in the way of rain chances throughout your 7-day forecast. And we also are going to continue to have these breezy northeasterly winds, occasional gusts up to 20 miles per hour like we're currently seeing. So let's go ahead and break it down surface map wise, where we have seen our frontal boundary pass through. There is still some residual rain and cloud cover on the backside of this frontal boundary, just because it's not really having a clean sweeping motion through the southeast. It continues to kind of stall and park and kick back into gear. So this rain can't really decide if it wants to stay in motion, if it wants to continue to push out ahead of the frontal boundary. So obviously the frontal boundary just having trouble making up its mind, kind of like it's deciding what to eat for dinner, and then it will eventually kick back into gear, sweep all of this moisture out of the forecast, but it's still got a ways to go. So high pressure has filtered in. This will continue to slide over to the east over the coming days, but this frontal boundary up here is also something I want to turn your attention to. I was talking about it on the morning show a little bit earlier today. We were talking about a wedge setup coming into play. Well, that's going to be because this boundary does make its way through the south and the southeast, but it's going to continue to not necessarily push all the way down through Florida like this other front that just came through. It's going to kind of meander down here, kind of try to stall out across the state of Georgia. But what's going to happen is high pressure behind that frontal boundary is going to cause it to sag down, and that's going to result in clockwise rotation of the winds, and that is going to filter in some cooler and drier air courtesy of that wedge setup, which you will see on Future View coming up in here in just a second. So for the rest of today, plan on mostly cloudy skies. I'm not saying you can't see sunshine, but it's only going to be an occasional peak of sunshine throughout the rest of this afternoon into the evening. There might be a non-zero chance that our southern counties get lucky and catch a sprinkle shower, but it's not going to be anything in the way of significant rain chances, and it's really just going to be only possible for our southernmost counties. I'm talking Chris, Wilcox, down to Dodge, Telfair, Wheeler counties. The rest of central Georgia and the majority of central Georgia, I would say probably about 98% of the area, going to remain dry throughout the rest of your Monday. Just going to be gloomy and going to be a gray day. Now we go into Tuesday morning, where we're still holding onto this cloud cover, but it gradually starts to break apart as we go into the afternoon and eventually into the evening hours as we're winding up the work and the school day throughout tomorrow. Tuesday at 5 p.m., finally some substantial peaks of sunshine, which will help lead to a slightly warmer temperature as we go into Tuesday afternoon. But now let's go into Wednesday morning, where it is a breezy start out of the north and the northeast. What was I talking about? That wedge setup that is going to continue to funnel in that slightly cooler and that slightly drier air up against the Appalachian Mountains, which will continue to guide it down here into central Georgia. And that's going to help keep your high temperature a little bit lower throughout the day on Wednesday. We're not talking much in the way of cloud cover to limit your warm up, but I would count on maybe a partly sunny day. We'll also be dealing with most of this cloud cover of the upper level, the cirrus level cloud cover variety, but still nothing in the way of impressive rain chances. It's just really that wedge is most profound and strongest as we go into Wednesday morning and into the afternoon. So that's going to do a good job of limiting the warm up and keeping your high temperatures well below average. Now we go into the rest of today. We will see the breeze subside as we go into the later hours of this afternoon into the evening. Light breeze as you walk out the door tomorrow, but then it really gets more widespread as we head into the afternoon. Gusts up to 20, maybe even 25 miles per hour, especially farther down to the south. But that breeze that will be present throughout your Wednesday, that is going to be probably the biggest and the most notable factor, where we have the potential for some gusts up to 30, maybe even 35 miles per hour, continuing to show you how profound that wedge is going to be as we go into the right smack dab middle of the midweek and the work week. And we're still holding on to some pretty gusty winds as you walk out the door on Thursday. So plan on your fair share of some breezy conditions and bad hair days over the course of your short-term forecast. 69 for a high temperature today, goes up to 74 tomorrow as we finally watch that cloud cover break apart from west to east. We get more peaks of sunshine. That leads to a warmer high temperature. 68 for a high temperature on Wednesday as we start to see that wedge set up, usher in that slightly cooler air mass and just knocking the numbers back down to pretty similar to what they will feel throughout this afternoon. So that's what I'll reference a lot on Wednesday's forecast. I'll say, hey, remember what it felt like Monday afternoon? That's what it's going to feel like a lot throughout today. You're just going to notice more so some gusty winds all throughout your Wednesday compared to the light breeze that we'll see today. Morning lows are pretty much unchanging, somewhere in the upper 40s, but remember, your average low temperature is 49 degrees. We are hovering right there around where we should be, maybe even a degree or two below that. But obviously the first time we felt that chill in the air in quite some time. But it is a special week here in not only Georgia, but for the golf community all over the world. And it is the most prestigious golf tournament that we do have known to man. A tradition unlike any other. The Masters has kicked off officially as of this Monday. I showed the Monday forecast, which Augusta has pretty much the same forecast as we do. But say you're having plans to make your way up to Augusta National tomorrow for the second day of the practice round on Tuesday. What should you plan on? Maybe some light layering as you're making your arrival at Augusta, but then you can probably feel free to shed some of those layers as you head into the afternoon. These winds that you do see, those are going to be your gusts. So these are not what the winds are blowing at consistently, but even some gusts up to say 20 miles per hour. Pretty similar to today, but overall maybe a slight downtick in the winds. And we actually will see the numbers crawl into the low 70s. High temperature around 72 degrees up in Augusta tomorrow. And we will watch the cloud cover steadily decrease throughout the day. So that's what you should plan on for that second day of the practice round. Now, Wednesday is definitely going to be a bit of a struggle, I do imagine, with some of those winds we were just looking at. Those will also be present in Augusta. So the par 3 champ, they are really going to have to work hard to earn that title as of this year. So afternoon high temperatures, a little bit of bouncing around for the beginning of the work week, but overall, the main message that I want to emphasize is that these numbers are below average Monday, Tuesday into Wednesday, and then we finally start our more substantial warming trend. 68 up about 5 degrees into Thursday, up another 5 degrees by the time we roll into Friday, with the first day that will be above average for your high temperature as we finally round out the work week on Friday. Morning low temperatures pretty much unchanging each and every day. There's going to be a slight chill in the air as you walk outside. Some areas will be in the upper 40s. Some areas will only be in the low 50s. But overall, your numbers are going to be pretty close and right around where they averagely sit at this time of year. 49 degrees for a morning low temperature. And we are going to try to make the climb back up to 50 by the time we roll into Friday. But I did want to show you that because we are seeing a warming trend. Typically with a warming trend, we start to get more moisture back in the forecast. That's just not the case. I have a 10% chance of rain as we go into Thursday, but it's really nothing worth putting too much stock into. It's really to just kind of cover the bases. And as we go into Friday, Saturday, all the way into Sunday, it's a beautiful looking weekend forecast, which we will be very thankful for, but we continue to really need the rain here in central Georgia, and there's just no signs of it. Even on the extended long-range models, we're seeing weather systems way out to the west, but none of them just make their way down into the southeast. So it is looking like a pretty quiet stretch of weather, cruise control weather, but finally we will kick off that warming trend as we go into the weekend. But first things first, this is why we have a very minuscule chance of rain on Thursday, because that is looking to be the day that we have the most moisture content in the atmosphere, but still not really substantial. We were talking about the 60s being where we kind of wanted the dew point temperatures to sit for better rain chances as of last week. We don't see that whatsoever. So you're going to see a lot of green on all our graphics throughout this week. It is an exciting time. This is a beautiful picture that actually Alex Forbes did snap when we went to the Masters a couple years ago. So Amen Corner on your background. First day and first round of the Masters going to be on Thursday, where there is a 10% chance of rain as of right now. But as we go day by day into the second, the third, and officially the fourth round, the closing round of the Masters, your numbers are going to feel a whole lot like they did as of last week. Low 80s and mid 80s are back as we wrap up the weekend, and both of those are paired up with nothing but sunshine, nothing in the way of rain chances, and the chilly feeling in the mornings will get a little bit more bearable as we head into the back half of the 7-day, but continue to wear that light layering out the door as we have kind of on and off cloud cover throughout the next couple of days. But like I said, pretty quiet weather stretch. We'll be very thankful for it and soak it up for the sake of outdoor plans. However, we're going to keep our fingers crossed that we do have some substantial rainmakers on the horizon eventually. But until we get there, we'll continue to keep you posted. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you at 11 a.m. once again tomorrow.